Blog Talk Radio.
Let's build a world, make it look better than this one. Light the old one up, watch it burn from a distance. A yellow flame light I can see in your eyes. 'Cause this new world will be, it will be our biggest pride.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Dose of Dr. Gwen this Friday, April 9th at noon Eastern Time. You were just listening to Dixon's Let's Build a World. I just love that song. I get it from one of the great podcast radio music stations where we can upload music for free, and that was a perfect song for today's topic, which is on digital citizenship. And I think moving away from Bullies a little bit, although today's the third in our series of Bullies in Your Backyard. We've been focusing on different ways that kids bully and what that's all about and what defines a bully. Now we need to kind of turn our attention to how do we really prevent this and turn our kids into good kids. And it's really about building a good world, online and offline, and what that's really about is becoming great citizens in the world. So that song really just has always resonated with me, and I find it's a wonderful song for a Friday. So today we have a great show planned. I've welcomed Stephen Balkam on, who's going to be calling in any minute now. Stephen is the founder of a great group called the Family Online Safety Institute that I became involved with last year. It's an international group that really promotes everything about the online world, and what I love about it is it's a think tank organization, and it brings together just leaders in every aspect of the online world, from government to industry to the nonprofit world to teachers to doctors like me to industry leaders, and everyone just gets together and talks and works together and tries to figure out how to make the online world a better place. Stephen's got a cool background. He's a mover and shaker himself, loves to start things up. Before starting FOSSI, he started the Internet Content Rating Association. He also started a group called Recreational Software Advisory Council. He's run some nonprofits, run a consulting business, so he's got a great background in business as well as the online world to really do something like the Family Online Safety Institute. So once he calls in, I think you're going to find he's got some great insight into the world of digital citizenship. Raising two kids who are now, almost the second one, the youngest, is almost a true teenager. I can tell you that it's really about helping them become good citizens, and everything they do really boils down to, I swear, I feel like I miss manners all the time, that it's really about teaching them how to just be good to each other. And even as moms, there are times that I just want to say, can't we just all play nice? I noticed today a writing colleague of mine, Jen Singer, did a segment on the Today Show about moms that essentially cyberbully each other and send mean texts to each other and do things to each other that are just atrocious, sending mean emails to each other. That's happened to me before. And I don't know if that's happened to any of you when you've been on the receiving end of a horrible phone call or a text or an email from another mom or another dad. It's a horrible feeling, but if our kids see us doing that and being mean to each other with texts or being mean to each other verbally or not showing respect to teachers or not showing respect to coaches, they will learn that behavior. I reminisce sometimes about when my oldest daughter was playing soccer many, many years ago when she was in kindergarten. My husband was coaching, and this was kindergarten, so we were just happy if they remembered which direction to run in. It was this chaotic thing with these odd rules. It wasn't even full soccer yet. And this was an all-girl team. They barely had 3 or 4 players on the field at any given time. And it was kind of this field where one direction was slightly uphill, even though you couldn't tell unless you were on the field. And one dad on the sideline was just yelling at his girl and yelling against the other team as if you were, in some Olympic playoff game, and even in that, it would have been inappropriate. My husband had to ask him to step away from the sideline because he was really upsetting the kids. This was about, kids learning a sport, and more importantly, at that age, it's really about teamwork, and I think parents forget that we want them to be good sports, and we want them to be good citizens, and that dad, it was all about winning at all costs, and that was in kindergarten. These were 5-year-old girls. And my youngest daughter, who was 3 at the time, was so impressed with that she refused to play soccer by the time she was old enough to play. So as parents, our insights and the way we conduct ourselves can have, great implications on what other kids do. So I think we have to take that into account. I think with technology, we have a great chance to really turn our communities into these amazing social networks. I'm a big believer in the good of technology, sometimes almost a bigger believer than some people want to believe. I'm constantly amazed by how people can look at the negatives of technology when it comes to kids. And there are negatives. I mean, let's be real. Stephen just signed on, so I'm going to bring him on in a second, and we'll get his input on it. But there are some negatives in technology, and Stephen and I can talk about that. But in the big picture, technology is so good. It has this power to learn that was so amazing. As I'm about to bring Stephen on, I'll just tell you a quick story. My daughter's reading the Odyssey, and as one of the connections she wanted to make was something in her religion class. So she went online last night and spent hours searching for this connection, and she actually found a connection between this one moment in religion and this one moment in the Odyssey she was reading that has a real moment in time that's occurring next week. She wouldn't have made that connection if it wasn't for the internet, and it was a thrilling moment for me to watch because for a almost 16-year-old to get so excited about something she found online that had a real-world application for her life as well as a moment in school that her teachers were fostering was just thrilling. And without the internet, she never would have found that. So I think it's really amazing, and we need to foster that and not look at the big boogeyman behind the wires and all the connections. So if we think that way, our kids will never really thrive. So I'm going to bring Stephen on. You just heard all about him 2 seconds ago, so I'm not going to reintroduce him, but he's going to provide some insight that I think you're going to be thrilled about. Hopefully I will not disconnect him. Blog Talk Radio has this odd feature. So let's see if I can get him on. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very well, very well.
Well, thank you so much for joining in.
Sure, my pleasure.
So I was just giving an introduction about you and digital citizenship, and well, what do you think about the whole thing? I know in parents' minds they still sometimes see the boogeyman when they think about the internet, and I know we both think of the infinite good potential. How do you think we can help people see that there's just such good to be had with it?
Well, I think we certainly can't deny that there are concerns and dangers, and not be oblivious to them. But at the same time, we shouldn't become paralyzed with fear either. The internet is like any extraordinary medium or tool. It is what we make of it. And there are some very challenging areas on the net, and there's some very challenging behaviors that both adults, I just was hearing you talking about adult cyberbullying, as well as child cyberbullying. I mean, there's all kinds of bad with the good. So our whole effort is to try and use a combination of what we call tools, rules, and schools to keep kids safe, obviously as absolute foundation, but then to through the use of technology, protect them from the bad stuff, but lead them towards the good stuff, and particularly to develop notions of their own responsibility online, as well as to be aware of the rights that they have in terms of free expression and gathering on websites and so on and so forth. So that's the sort of core of our work.
Now, it's interesting you brought up schools. There's been a lot of discussion, at least in my inbox lately, about people's disappointment with schools, especially around the issues of bullying, and people would like to see schools be able to do more, not just in terms of being able to enforce rules, since you mentioned that word, when things go wrong, but maybe have more tools to help kids manage the things that go wrong, especially with technology, but do more so that more can go right. I sometimes wonder that, worry that schools are a little bit behind in managing technology so that they can't move things forward in a positive direction for education. And they also don't know what to do when things do go wrong, when a child sends a text that's inappropriate or when a child truly does cyberbully. Everything freezes, everyone panics, and nobody knows what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, to be fair to them, schools reflect the wider community. And in my own daughter's middle school, the outgoing principal, quite frankly, is not up to speed on technology. He's only just started using email about a year ago. Freely admits it and is glad that he's leaving the teaching profession because he can't cope with all of the changes and the advances. Now, he freely admits it, and he's leaving. The next principal who is being interviewed and the various candidates being interviewed are being questioned and being challenged on not only their knowledge of technology, but their use of it in schools, and for that matter, the administration of not just the technology that's in the school, but the technologies that the kids bring with them to school, in the form of laptops, but particularly cell phones, smartphones, many of which, of course, can access the Internet and, of course, take pictures and videos and immediately post them on places like Facebook and MySpace and so on. So it is a great challenge to be a teacher these days. We've heard the phrase digital natives, digital immigrants. We, the older ones, are the immigrants. I saw my first website when I was 39 years old. I told that to a group of fifth graders recently. A little boy at the front of the class said, "Well, how did you get in touch with your friends when you were a kid?" And I said, we had these things called bicycles back in our day. And we used to just ride over to a friend's house and see them. Well, that's prehistory now. And the digital natives, the ones who've grown up with the Internet and with technology in their homes and in schools, expect to be able to get online, expect to be able to be connected 24/7. I don't necessarily think being connected 24/7 is necessarily the right way or necessarily healthy or a balanced life, but certainly more connected than they are in their rather 19th century bound schools. So the challenge is to allow the kids more access to the technology at school and the technology that they bring rather than having to ask them to power down, while at the same time getting the teachers up to speed with good technology tools to limit where access needs to be limited, and rules that speak to the kids' own sense of responsibility for their actions, and obviously for there to be sanctions if the kids overstep the mark. And that hopefully would speak to issues like cyberbullying, harassment, and the kind of really awful treatment of each other that can be compounded but when the kid ends up going home or receives text messages throughout the day and night, which just continues to harass them.
Now, given, as I mentioned before you came on, that we do live in a culture where parents aren't always nice to each other, and that there's been a lot of emphasis placed on that lately, sort of this apple falls too far from the tree mentality. And it's interesting, a psychologist last week mentioned it on the show as well, and he deals with a lot of cyberbullying. So it almost seems like there needs to be a retraining of people, just kind of a general niceness lesson. And maybe technology just makes it easier, or maybe the stresses of society are bringing it out more. But there has been a lot of chatter online about parents' stress levels being through the roof, everybody being a little snippy with one another, and kids are sort of getting that behavior reinforced. And if you were advising a group of parents on how to sort of retrain themselves with technology, how to be good citizens themselves, how would you approach it?
Well, first of all, we have to make a distinction between digital literacy and media literacy. Digital literacy, in our view, is the understanding of the machines, the devices, and what they are capable of doing. So, how does a laptop work? Not underneath the hood, but I mean, how do you connect to it? How do you connect to the internet? How do you set parental controls? How do you check on the history of yourself and your kids? How do you set privacy settings? And for that matter, and almost more importantly, what do those cell phones actually do? How can you limit your child's access to, say, text messaging after 9 o'clock at night, which, of course, we now have restricted our own daughter that she can't text after a certain time in the evenings. You've got to understand the machinery itself. Then there's the media literacy part, which is the understanding of what's coming at you in the form of all of these different types of sites. So anything from social networking sites to YouTube to new wacky meeting places like Club Penguin, which the younger ones love to go on to, the virtual worlds and so on. But also how to create content, how to create a blog, how to Twitter, how to create a video and upload it. These are all skills that parents really, quite frankly, are going to have to know and to learn if they going to have a chance of setting parameters and setting rules for their own kids, who at the moment at least, maybe we're in a generational shift, but certainly at the moment we have a situation where the kids are fearless and the parents are clueless.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, that old digital divide that people used to want to talk about. Henry Jenkins phrases it more of a participation divide or a participation gap. Mm-hmm. And that's almost for me, a more user-friendly way of looking at it, because it really is a matter nowadays of who's participating where, and it seems that parents are using the technology, but they're not using it where their kids are, so it makes it impossible for them to parent effectively, because the kids can just go in their room, shut the door, and I have the same problem with my daughter in texting, but she puts her phone on vibrate, so we can hear the thing go 24/7, and we finally just have to say to her, shut the thing off.
Right.
And but then we'll hear the typing of Facebook, so we have to put limitations around that.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes sort of this, 24/7 endless connection. And I think kids do need an off switch. They need time to connect with their families and time to connect with other people in their lives sort of without technology. I love the fact that TV Turn-Off Week, or I guess now it's called Turn-Off Week, falls during April vacation here on the East Coast, because that forces people who are willing to follow it to just put in some parameters where nobody's using technology. And it's usually a big challenge for us because we're usually traveling somewhere where there are lots of screens, like New York City. But we do follow it. It's a great week to just say no screens. We're going to just, keep the cell phones away and not watch TV and just stay on the go and sort of, purge the soul of all those screens and the need to be on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And it's the first day is hell, but then after that you kind of realize we can do this.
You can actually do this. Going back to your earlier comments about parents at soccer games and so on, I mean, if you come home from work and you're already on your BlackBerry as you walk through the door, and then you sit down for dinner and you continue to email or text through the meal, it's hardly surprising that your kids are going to be doing the same. They don't hear what you say, they just see what you do and copy it. So there has to be, quite frankly, we absolutely believe in sitting down once a day at least for a meal together. And we don't bring our portable devices with us. We switch the TV off. We don't even answer the phone. It's just one of those things. There's a sort of sacred 20 minutes, half an hour that we know each day we're going to get. Now, what's ironic, you're mentioning about switching the screens off. What seems to be a bit ironic now is that people are almost glad when the family gathers around to watch TV because at least the family's all in the same room and you're just consuming some media. We usually put the ads on mute or skip them if we've recorded something. But that's now become a kind of well, at least we're all sitting around the electronic hearth, and we're all in the same room. Because so often what happens is we all go off into our own corners with our own devices, and we're not connecting. We're connecting with others outside the home or consuming or whatever. But I just find it quite funny that, there have been years and years, decades of angst about TV, too much television, and so on. But now it's almost been seen as some kind of relief.
Yeah, I think people don't know what to do, and sometimes they're sort of eating on the go, so I guess better to all veg out in the same veg out spot than all sit around the table. It's funny, you mentioned the family meal. There's a growing movement of literature that being around the family meal and, having, I think, up to 5 family meals without technology a week is protective for kids against not using drugs and not using alcohol and keeping them in school and going on to have a productive life. And there have been books written about that. So we're a huge believer, and I always tell people it doesn't even have to be dinner. It can be breakfast. It can be lunch. Sure. You can do it on weekends. Just gather around the table. Do something. Even if you have to do it with takeout, just do it so that you're sitting in the same spot. And I agree, without technology, I find it sad when people go out to dinner and you see them all having their thumbs clicking on something. It's like, just put them away. You're out to eat.
Yeah.
You don't need those things. We did do that once, the day we all got our new cell phones. It was kind of like a family cell phone day, and we were all very excited. But then after that, we sort of razz each other when we do it. It's usually people razzing me. I will admit it. I'm the one who pulls out the iPhone, and I can get carried away with my little applications. But then I'm razzable, and I put it away. But, you have to just set that family rule. If somebody falls off the wagon, give each other a hard time. This is family time.
I agree. Well,
and I think that works.
Yeah, it also just helps to model, again, social interaction. There are an awful lot of kids who I see who really don't seem to know how to engage with each other, just in simple conversation, because so much of their time is heads buried in screens or texting to other kids who they're not actually physically with. They're communicating elsewhere. Now, it could be that in 50 years' time we'll look back and say, oh, why were we so concerned about that? This is just how humans communicate now, and that this could be, we're in the middle of a evolutionary phase. But I'm old-fashioned enough to think that good old conversations with eye contact, who knows, the odd bit of physical contact, just touching someone's hand or arm, is a very, very positive thing for us as humans. I really don't think that that's something that we should lose. And
I know. Both my girls are chatty, and I was just going to say I would be sad if that was gone. Both my girls love to talk and talk about their day, and maybe they get that gift of gab from me. But our house is very noisy. They love to just chat and pontificate, and I can't imagine a home without that. Just that need to kind of go off and talk about, especially my teenager. She's at that age of just coming up with great revelations where she can solve the world's problems.
Right.
And I can't imagine a teenager being able to do that without using words. You can't do that. I hate, though, when kids interject text speech in their languages. I don't need to hear LOL. Just tell me it's funny.
Yes. But I also think that also could be an interesting cure for cyberbullying or just bullying generally. If parents are communicating, by the way, if the parents themselves are communicating civilly, and again, modeling that without having to do it like it's in some kind of instruction or lesson. Just simply being nice to each other. And then talking with respect and love with their own children will infuse unconsciously a pattern of behavior that the kids will then take with them to school. If they see their parents bickering with each other or not backing each other up, or and then being disrespectful to their own kids, that just gives them the green light. Oh, that's the way you do it. That's how you behave as an adult. And that's what kids and teens are desperately looking for all the time, cues and signals about how to behave in the grown-up world. Just as an example, I'm here in Washington. I was fortunate enough to get a ticket to the Washington Nationals opening day in baseball here. President Obama threw out the opening pitch and so on. It was very cool. Unfortunately, I ended up sitting in a section of the stadium which I was surrounded by Phillies fans, Philadelphia Phillies who had come down. Of course, World Series champions. Well, they did not last year, but they have been champions. And they were, shall we say, they had been drinking a while, and they were pretty excitable, but actually also at times getting increasingly obnoxious. And, even at the introductions of the players, which is usually a very nice moment when everyone gets introduced, we're booing the National fans, booing the Nationals players. And I couldn't help but shooting a look over at this row of kids that these adults had brought with them, silently just kind of listening to their parents throwing abuse down onto the field and thinking, well, that's about as bad a modeling as I can think of. What on earth are these kids going to think about when they get back home or back into a social situation? So, we adults have got to take responsibility for our behavior and not just expect the kids to behave well at school. And for that matter, not just expect the teachers are going to contain our kids if we are so badly behaved.
No, that is. I think that's the big point. Teachers can only do so much, and the lessons in school have to be reinforced at home, or they're just going to fall on deaf ears. And I think parents don't really spend enough time with that. Bickering is a normal part of life, but I've heard a lot of experts say, it's the resolution of the bickering. Is there a winner and a loser in your home, or do you sort of kiss and make up? In homes where people can resolve sort of general day-to-day bickering, where, you sit and you end up talking about it, and you can have, maybe sometimes, there'll be a compromise and other times there won't, but that people, the kids will learn that you can actually have a disagreement and have it end with people agreeing to disagree, and it doesn't have to turn into this big brawl. That's healthy, as opposed to somebody sort of getting bullied in their own house, which is very unhealthy.
Right.
And I think that accounts for the high divorce rate and kids feeling so unsettled. At least that's what we see in our town, where some of the kids just feel like they never know which end is up from day to day, and you can see why they're so on edge and maybe why bullying goes on the rise. They have no release. And then I think the schools end up sort of having to figure out how to put these kids back together every day. They go home, they fall apart, they come back, and they release all this energy. It becomes really tense for them, and that becomes a challenge. But I think a lot of times what parents have to realize is there doesn't have to be a winner and a loser. It's sort of more of an agree to disagree thing. Especially, I love the family functions and moments where big gatherings happen where people feel like with politics or even healthcare that they have to impose their view on other people as opposed to just listening. Just listen to the other side and throw out your argument, and you might not agree with my opinion, I might not agree with yours, but we can have a nice discourse about it and take in each other's opinions and move on. And a lot of adults can't do that, so then kids never learn to do that, and all this chaos happens, and it can become quite physical, I think, because kids don't have the language or the skills. And I think with technology, then they fly. They fly into their, text quickly, that shoot from the hip thing. So the technology becomes an extension for the behavior.
Yes, indeed. Well, just going back to the original thought about this idea of digital citizenship, I mean, we are, particularly in this country, very, very good and loud about proclaiming our rights of free speech, of assembly, of religion, of yada, yada, yada. Not so great always about then living up to the responsibilities of what it is to be a citizen. And if we think about it in the offline space, to be a citizen of a country requires you to do certain things, obvious things like pay taxes and ideally to vote in elections, but more general and almost informal things. If you see an accident, go to the scene of the accident. Call the police, call the ambulance, go to your neighbor's help. Act civilly out in the public sphere. And so this concept of both rights and responsibilities is something that we're trying to look at and develop and foster in the online space. So what's the equivalent of running to help someone in an accident? Well, perhaps it's if you witness someone being cyberbullied in a chat space or on a Facebook page, report it. There are reporting buttons on every page of Facebook now. don't be a bystander, someone just watching, or for that matter, don't pile in if someone is being harassed or bullied or whatever online. So we're very much at the very early stages of this and trying to kind of figure it out as we go along. But quite frankly, it is the online space where our children will live the rest of their lives, as well as in the physical space, obviously. So it's just something that we have to be clearer about, calling out the kinds of actions and behaviors that we want to see in our kids, and if we want to see them, then we ourselves are going to have to act them out and be the change that we want to see in our kids' lives.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that's exactly my position on digital citizenship as well. It's I don't view the world as an online and an offline world. And I think if we can find a way of getting people to realize that all those things we do, in our real world, kitchen safety and teaching our kids how to drive a car properly and, street smarts when they're riding their bike or walking to school, all of those rules that they have in their head, there are equivalents in the online world. Some are the same, some are different, but they have the basic skills. They just have to execute them differently because there's not a person in front of them or all those other cues that you have when you're negotiating the space of the sort of the offline world. They can do it, but it requires a little more savvy because kids do need many more cues. And when you're not plugged into something, you have faces and tone and cars and things around you. I think they get confused with the screen, and it's very tempting when there's that anonymous thing in front of them. But parents, if they're involved, I think kids are very successful in doing it. And I do think kids show more judgment than they don't. Yeah. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to get. I noticed in your article in the Huffington Post, you mentioned that, many kids do, 1 in 5 kids do sext. That means that many more kids don't. Right. And I think if we take some of those statistics and we topple them upside down, people can be much more reassured that, there's cyberbullying and there's sexting and, there are some predator issues, although, we've pretty much debunked that. And there are those risks, and we don't want to minimize them because some kids are truly hurt, and when they do get depressed and suicidal, really horrible things happen. But they're rare, and they can usually be identified if we can sort of keep our eyes out for them and know how to identify them. And the majority of kids, the overwhelming majority, don't have these things happen to them. So I think that's more the healthy way, I think, to look at the online world. And I think if parents and, if all of us can sort of get parents to sort of flip those numbers a little bit, they'll see that the numbers of people kids engaging well online are gigantically enormous.
Yeah, it's called the social norms approach, and actually it's one in which to empower kids to talk to other kids or to model behavior with their peers, which I think we've hardly even begun to tap. We've just really got over about a decade of techno panic, really, of scaring ourselves silly with programs like To Catch a Predator, so that folks are thinking that as soon as they let their kids out on the internet, these creeps are going to show up at their door, and that has really not been very helpful at all in setting up a mindset around the realities of the online space. The realities is that for the most part, kids and adults go on every day and either have a good time or have a productive time or find what they were looking for without any mishap whatsoever. So we need to reinforce that and keep finding behaviors that lead for those positive results, while keeping, obviously, aware of the real dangers that are there, but not just always focusing on that and going to fear as a default. And I'm afraid the media has got an awful lot to answer for, not just in reporting sensational news about the internet, but in creating programs that reinforce it.
Yeah, I think the media is looking for problems. The Kaiser Generation M2 report I found incredibly reassuring, and we know kids are multitasking and using a lot of media, but I didn't look at that as anything more than, we know this is happening, and we know the numbers have gone up, but kids are thriving in school, and they're thriving in society, and they're thriving in their lives. And the kids who are excessively using technology, well, they're not thriving in their lives. The ones who are texting every 10 seconds, they're having some trouble. Yeah. So, those kids are the outliers. We don't worry about those. I've had a lot of reporters call me lately trying to twist that data to show that there's a widespread epidemic in childhood, and they want a lot of us to go on record stating that so they can paint a picture of childhood as multitasking is bad, as opposed to the healthiness that it actually is promoting in these kids, because they are doing something that a lot of us can't do, and it's actually working for them. Yeah. So it's an interesting trend. The media is getting a little frustrated, I think, because they're not able to get a health provider, or at least a pediatrician, to go on record stating that. Yeah. So I think the data is very reassuring, and I think the kids who are going to get in trouble online are usually the ones that are getting in trouble offline. There's a lot of us talk about that all the time. It's not a one place or the other. Kids at risk are kids at risk, and the kids who have trouble, and it's because they live in one world. It's just the way they are. It's how they're wired.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
So, yeah, it's interesting. I love how the media think and try to twist that, and they get quite irate actually when they call you up trying to put words in your mouth, and you're not willing to do that. So I find it interesting too. Even Oprah's picked up on this. She's on a mission to get people to not text in their car. Mm-hmm. So she's one media person who's really on a mission to clean that up, and she's done some interesting studies with that. So there's hope that she'll go more on that realm, and she's actually focusing on parents, trying to get she's getting everyone to sign this pledge, getting them to realize they don't need to conduct business in their car and talk on their cell phone and even use Bluetooth. She did an interesting, almost like a drunk driving thing. So that was kind of cool. So if you were giving a group of parents advice on how to even start, you've got these stressed out parents. They're everyone's texting at the dinner table, and they kind of like the idea of the citizenship approach, but they don't know where to begin. What do you tell people?
Well, I mean, the first and last bit of advice always is talk with your kids. It's surprising how many parents forget to do just that. They're busy, they're rushing around, they want to watch the Masters golf tournament, whatever. They forget to actually just sit down and talk with their kids. So that's number one. On the technology side, they're going to have to get their hands dirty. They really are going to have to spend a bit of time, maybe humbly asking their kids to show them sites and services and things, just to get a bit more savvy about the technology and the wacky new places that people go to, to download an app if they happen to have a phone or whatever, just to experience that, so that they're speaking from a foundation of some knowledge. They don't have to have all of the knowledge. They don't have to be able to manipulate every Xbox Live game or whatever, because what the parents have, hopefully, is some life experience and some wisdom and some moral compass. That's the part that they want to convey to their kids. It's better, of course, if they also have some knowledge of the technology. One thing we offer on our website at fosi.org, that's fosi.org, is a family safety contract. And what you can do is you download that, and it's a 2-page contract, which is a number of cyber do's and don'ts. One section for your children or child, and the other for the adults. And it's a good place to go through, and it feels very grown up to do this. We did this with our own daughter, line by line, and it talks about what would happen if your child stumbles upon content that's inappropriate or makes them feel uncomfortable. But it also suggests and asks the parents not to, for instance, not to overreact. I promise not to overreact if you show me that you've come across this by accident or whatever. Some parents will absolutely freak out if they see that their son is, looking at porn or whatever, and that can drive a kid underground. So that's a useful tool. Obviously, if your kids are younger, we do recommend using filtering technology, and there's plenty on the market There's plenty that's free and already built into the operating systems, for instance. Both Microsoft and Apple have free parental controls. All of the cell phone companies have got parental controls now for their cell phones. The search engines have got them. There really is no excuse not to use them if you feel that it's appropriate, particularly for your younger kids. For the older ones, you may want to have more of a kind of monitoring device that might alert you if there's some text messages that are a little bit problematic, or you may want to just check their history. Just let your kids know that you are keeping an eye on them. Don't let them out on social networking sites until they're 13. A lot of people don't realize that you're meant to be 13 before you go onto MySpace or Facebook. We've had cases where parents have actively helped their kids to lie about their date of birth so they can get them onto Facebook at age 7 or 8.
A lot of parents don't understand that. Can you elaborate on that a few minutes? I've had parents in my own town tell me that I'm just being the cyber police because they know in my upcoming book I have a whole section on that, and I've recruited, a gazillion experts to support me on that one because they don't understand, that there's some developmental reasons behind that as well as some legal reasons.
Okay, well, let's take a step back. So, first of all, there's something called the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, which requires companies that work on the Internet to get parental permission to market to children under the age of 13. So what Facebook and MySpace have said was they didn't want to go through all of that procedure. That just was not something they wanted to have to do. So they wrote into their terms of service, the rules for being on MySpace and Facebook, that you have to be 13 or older to come on. So in the registration for Facebook, say, you have to put in your date of birth. And if your date of birth shows that you're 12 or 7 or 9, it just politely tells you that you're too young and sorry about that. So what some kids do, and what I think is perverse, what some adults and parents do for their kids, is to put in a false date of birth that shows that they're 13 or 14 or 15 or 22 to allow them on. And that's just wrong. I mean, it's wrong from the point of view of Facebook. In fact, Facebook trawls their profiles to find things like a message that says, hey, look at my pictures of my 11th birthday party, for instance, which kids put up all the time. And they'll take them off. They'll delete their profile. But it's wrong from a parenting point of view. I mean, what are we teaching our kids here? That it's okay to just go in and lie and gain access to a site that, quite frankly, is really, Facebook, let's face it, was set up for college kids. It was more of a 18-plus environment when it first got started, and in many ways it remains a pretty older teen kind of an environment with people, and adults too, with people putting up very let's just say racy pictures or stuff about the party that happened last night, or just, pretty strong language that you really, really don't want your 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old to gain access to.
Yeah, it's almost like, letting your 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old go into a party with 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds offline. You wouldn't do it.
Right.
So, some of the things I see my, almost 16-year-old posting, for an almost 16-year-old, sometimes I have to scratch my head, but as long as it doesn't really violate, privacy or get her to a point where I think, if a college admissions officer saw it, she would be in over her head. It's a different life. And even with my 12-year-old going on at 13, I think that is really the youngest age you'd want to consider it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure even for 13-year-olds it's necessarily the best venue with, newer social networking sites coming up that's maybe a better, young teen site. Young teens are so different than older teens. Facebook isn't necessarily a one-stop social networking site for all of them. And I think the older teens who were on when they were young, they look back on, they were like, what were we thinking?
Yes.
I know that's true for my daughter and her friends.
Now, there's a number of services popping up, but there's a particularly interesting one that's about to launch called Togetherville. And Togetherville is trying to address that very issue. the guy who's setting it up, he's based out in Palo Alto, and he's got a very interesting team together. He has younger kids, and his view is that kids should be doing social networking, not just going on to Club Penguin and interacting with these little cute avatars that is very, very limited in what they can do, and to a certain extent have very commercial implications, particularly purchasing points and all the rest. But his idea is to link your children's Togetherville profile with your Facebook profile, so you can allow them into this space and allow them to interact with the children of your friends, some of whom they may never have met. Because the big fear has always been you mustn't speak to people who you don't know. But what if they're the children of your best friends, but they happen to live in Denver? You see? And there would be an area where the kids could be interacting and playing, and then there was a joint area where the parents can come in and interact with their kids. So just keep an eye out for that. And it could be a way to help to steer parents who are anxious to get their kids, or at least when their 9-year-olds come begging them for a Facebook account, they can say, well, not till you're 13, but in the meantime, there's this pretty cool place called Togetherville. We could meet where you could open up there.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the perfect in-between, and probably a group a few of us should reach out to and just support, because that's exactly what is needed. I don't think we necessarily want all of our 13, 14-year-olds or even older tweens on some of these sites where it doesn't teach them how to negotiate social networking through avatars. I think Webkins and Neopets and even Club Penguin, they're fun and they're great for the little kids, but then at some point kids need to really take off the training wheels and learn how to use these sites, but without Facebook, without interacting with grown-ups. And
well, Togetherville, I think really, really goes after that kind of 8 to 12-year-old market. And I think what's really interesting about them is they're going to develop an educational element to it, where the kids can then continue to use Togetherville in school through projects.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, I just think it's got tremendous potential. And while we're on the notion of technology in schools, I just want to put in a word for the iPad, which I know has both been praised and damned in equal measures out in the press. But there's an incredible... What happens with
new Apple products?
Right. There's an amazing video on YouTube of a father handing his 2.5-year-old daughter a new toy. Now, we love new toys, don't we? She said, oh, yes. And it's this iPad. And within moments, this girl has scrolled around and opened applications and is playing a game, and, she just knows exactly what to do. It's so intuitive. And I just looked at this thing, and I'm thinking, this is the future of education. I mean, why lug around 30 pounds in textbooks when you can put it all onto this thing? And, you can upload new material to the texts, or you can even interact with the publishers. You can interact with your fellow students and your teachers and so on. I just think it has some remarkable potential for upending.
I have it on my wish list already, because I've been looking for a smaller laptop-like thing instead of lugging my laptop everywhere. And, you want something thin and portable, and I think once it works out sort of some of the Wi-Fi and other kinks, I think it does have enormous potential for all of us. I particularly love the page flipping feature. And, some of us, I was looking at, some of the Kindles and Nooks, and, it gets hard to lug around books and all of your computer stuff, and they've really kind of filled that little gap. A couple colleges in this area already bought a bunch for their incoming students and place those orders, because kids don't even want to lug around a laptop anymore. They find it bulky, and it's bad for their back health to have all of that stuff. My daughter must have 60 pounds of books that she lugs back and forth with this big binder. This would take care of all of that. They wouldn't have, the orthopedists would be happy, and us pediatricians would be happy, and those of us into the latest and greatest cyber tools would be happy. But I agree. I think this is a really cool thing, and if Steve Jobs is listening, we would all love one to play with. That would be very fun. But yeah, I think it sounds great. Okay. So cool. Well, listen, we've been on for 45 minutes, which I know is a little longer than we had talked about, and we basically covered the entire gamut from safety to on and offline cool issues. Anything else you think people should know about where the world seems to be heading?
Well, again, we may look back
in a nutshell.
we may well look back at this time thinking, oh, those were the good old days, because, who knows, in 20 or 30 years' time, the kids will be coming home from school and say, but Daddy, everyone's got a brain implant. Why can't I have one? I mean, the technology is just astonishing. I read something in Wired only a day or two ago about a pill. When you take you probably know this, when you prescribe medication to people, one of the big problems is people actually taking them and taking them properly. Well, they now have developed a chip so small that and a little radio antenna that will signal to the doctor when you have taken your pill. And so we're going to be swallowing more and more electronics as it gets smaller and smaller. And, it's going to have a big impact on the way in which we live and the way in which we learn. And if there was a chip that could help me remember the names of everyone I've ever met, I'd certainly swallow that, I can tell you.
Yeah, I need that chip as well. It's kind of amazing that some of the technologies we used to watch in Star Trek and read about in books like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, we actually now have.
Yeah.
So that's very, very cool. Like the iPad. I mean, that's like the little tablet they used to walk around in Star Trek and kind of get all their cool information on. Well, we have one now.
Yeah.
So that is very, very cool to me, at least. Well, thank you, Stephen. It was really a pleasure talking to you and chatting about all these very cool issues. And maybe sometime in the future you'll come back on and we'll talk about the next latest and greatest evolution of this topic.
Well, we'd love to, and thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Have a great rest of the day.
All right, you too. Thanks.
All righty. So that was a wonderful show with lots of food for thought to talk about. This is definitely one of those conversations that not only can we go on for hours about, but people actually do. The Family Online Safety Institute has a big conference every fall that covers a couple of days' worth of this topic, and they do some international talk. So go to fosi.org, O-R-G. There's a lot of great information on that website. And I want to thank Stephen Balkam again from the Family Online Safety Institute for coming on and spending most of the hour with us to talk about this issue, and thank people in the chat room for swinging by. It's been a pleasure to have you all listening. So next week's show will also be on a Friday, April 16th at noon Eastern Time. And the topic of that show is Surviving April Vacation Unplugged in honor of Turn-Off Week. That'll be a shorter show, about 30 minutes or so, to talk about ways to stay unplugged during April vacation. And a lot of you know that my family and I often end up in New York City during April vacation week. We have relatives and friends down there, and true to form, we're heading down there again. So we all often pick the most challenging place in America to stay unplugged, because Times Square is probably the biggest collection of TV and video screens I have ever seen in my entire life. Luckily, unlike past years, we're only going down for 24 hours to the city, so that bodes a little bit better for us to stay unplugged during the week than it has in past years. So I will toss out my 2 cents on Friday about staying unplugged for the week and give you some strategies that have worked for my family and I. But it really is important to learn to be unplugged, and along the lines of becoming good digital citizens and helping kids kind of negotiate the online and the offline world, I do think it helps. And I got to make a plug that we, as parents and adults, we're the last generation to really remember life unplugged. And if you keep that pearl in the back of your mind, it almost makes it a sense of urgency to teach that to our kids, because once they become parents themselves, it'll be very hard for them to remember how to be unplugged if they don't already have that in their experience. So if we don't reinforce that, we don't teach them how to have some balance and moderation, then we will, they'll never have it, and the world will just continue to be more and more plugged in, which is wonderful in many ways, but I think it's those offline moments that really create for the true magic in the world. Now, I want to end with something that Stephen wrote in an article in his Huffington Post blog because it really kind of drives home the whole digital citizenship concept and what we've been talking about the last hour. And I will post a link of this article on my blog as well as the Delicious page where you guys can follow up in your oodles of free leisure time. Stephen writes, we need to use the web to have a discourse about ways to civilly conduct ourselves and to create fair rules to govern and manage our online lives and communities. We have to marry the innovative approach of teaching 21st century skills with the new notions of digital diplomacy and create 21st century citizens to inherit and inhabit this newfound digital land. And I will leave you with that thought as I sign off for the week and see you next week as we talk about going from the digital world to the unplugged world. Have a wonderful and healthy week.
Let's build a world, make it look better than this one, light the old one up, watch it burn from a distance, a yellow flaming light. I can see in your eyes, 'cause this new world will be, it will be our biggest pride. Watch them shine brighter than ever. Lie down on our backs and let us see if we could measure the space between here and the moon. This light will die out soon. Did you think that it would last forever? This world so torn, so small, in our hands it will never see the signs ahead and stop before it's dead. Forget about the past. What's done is done, and we will have to